The night my husband's heart stopped in his sleep, I lay beside him for 3 hours before I realized he was gone. I kept talking to him in the dark, telling him about the grocery list, about how the porch light needed fixing, about how our grandson had lost his first tooth. It wasn't until I reached over to pull the blanket up to his chin that I felt how cold his skin had become. That was 2 years ago. I was 61 then. My name is Helen Novak, and until that night, I thought I understood what loneliness meant. I didn't. Not even close. Frank and I had been married for 38 years. He was a plumber. Not glamorous, not exciting, but steady. He kept the pipes running in half the homes in southeast Portland, and he kept our life running too. He paid the bills. He fixed what was broken. He drove me to my doctor's appointments when my knees started giving out. When he died, I discovered that steady isn't the same as prepared. There was no life insurance. Frank had let the policy lapse 3 years earlier when the premiums went up, and he never told me. The savings account had $4,200 in it. The mortgage still had 11 years left. Our daughter, Christine, lived in Boston with her husband and worked 60 hours a week at a law firm. She sent money when she could, but she had her own bills, her own life. Our son, Kevin, was in the military, stationed in Germany. He called when he remembered, which wasn't often, so I sold the house. I sold it for less than it was worth because I needed the money fast, and even after paying off the mortgage, I was left with barely enough to start over. I found a small apartment above a dry cleaner in the street. John's neighborhood, the kind of place where the walls are thin and the radiator clanks all night like someone tapping a wrench against the pipes. Frank would have known how to fix that. I got that thought out of my head fast. I needed work. At 61, with bad knees and 20 years out of the job market, my options were slim. But the Riverside Community Kitchen, a nonprofit that served hot meals to low-income families and homeless people in North Portland, needed a morning volunteer coordinator. It wasn't really a job. They paid me a small stipend, $800 a month, enough to cover groceries and bus fare if I was careful. My Social Security covered the rent. Barely. But it gave me somewhere to be 5 mornings a week, and after 2 years of silence in that apartment, somewhere to be felt like everything. The kitchen operated out of a converted warehouse on Lombard Street. We served breakfast and lunch to about 150 people a day. The regulars knew each other, knew the staff, knew which days we had fresh fruit and which days it was canned peaches. I checked volunteers in, organized the serving schedule, made sure the health code posters were up, and handled the small emergencies that came with feeding a lot of hungry people in a small space. It wasn't complicated work, but it mattered. I could see that it mattered every time someone came through the line and said thank you. That's where I first noticed him. He came every morning right when we opened at 7, always the first or second person through the door. He was a black man, tall even with the stoop in his shoulders, maybe 70 or so. He had a neatly trimmed gray beard, and he wore an old Army field jacket with the patches still on it, 82nd Airborne. He never cut in line, never raised his voice, never complained about the food. He would take his tray to the same corner table, eat slowly, and read whatever newspaper someone had left behind. When he was done, he would bus his own tray, nod politely to whoever was working the counter, and leave. I watched him for 2 weeks before I spoke to him. There was something about the way he carried himself, straight-backed, dignified, like a man who hadn't forgotten who he used to be. One morning, I brought him a cup of coffee. We didn't usually do table service, but I poured an extra cup and walked it over. "You look like you could use a refill," I said. He looked up at me, surprised. His eyes were dark brown and sharp, the kind of eyes that don't miss much. "That's very kind of you, ma'am." "Thank you." "Helen," I said. "Please call me Helen." "James," he said. "James Okafor." We talked for a few minutes that morning. The next morning, a few minutes more. Within a month, our morning coffee had become a ritual. I would pour 2 cups, sit down across from him, and we would talk while the kitchen hummed around us. I learned that James had served 22 years in the Army, 2 tours in the Gulf, 1 in Afghanistan. He had been a combat medic. After he retired, he worked as an EMT in Tacoma for 8 years until his back gave out. His wife had died of breast cancer in 2019. His son had gotten into drugs and disappeared somewhere in California. His military pension, the one thing that should have kept him safe, had been mismanaged by a financial advisor who turned out to be running a Ponzi scheme. By the time the authorities caught up, the money was gone. James had been on the street for 14 months. He told me all of this without self-pity. He stated facts the way a medic would describe a wound. Clean, precise, detached from the pain of it. That's what broke my heart. Not the story itself, though it was terrible, but the way he told it, like he had practiced not feeling it. "You deserved better," I told him one morning. "After everything you gave this country, you deserved so much better." James just sipped his coffee. Deserving and getting are two different languages, Helen. Most people are fluent in one, but not the other. I started bringing him things. A warmer scarf when December came, a paperback I thought he might like, thick socks from the dollar store. Nothing expensive, because I had nothing expensive to give. But I made sure he had a hot meal every morning and someone to talk to, and he made sure I had the same. That was our deal, unspoken but understood. The months passed. Winter softened into a gray, wet Portland spring. I got to know the kitchen better, the staff, the rhythms, the politics. The director was a man named Victor Brennan. He was in his 50s, well-dressed for someone who ran a soup kitchen, always in pressed slacks and polished shoes. He had a big smile and a firm handshake, and he was very, very good at fundraising. Donors loved him. He threw galas, organized charity runs, appeared on local news segments talking about hunger in Portland. The money came in steadily, and Victor made sure everyone knew it. His wife, Dana, handled the bookkeeping. She was quiet, efficient, and rarely seen in the kitchen itself. She worked from a small office in the back, door usually closed. When she did come out, she was polite but distant, the kind of person who smiles without warmth. About 4 months ago, Victor hired his nephew, a young man named Tyler, to manage food procurement and inventory. Tyler was 25, fit, with a buzz cut and a loud laugh. He drove a truck that seemed too expensive for someone working at a nonprofit, but I told myself it was none of my business. Tyler handled deliveries, tracked what came in and what went out, and kept the freezers stocked. He was competent enough, if a little careless. I noticed that he sometimes signed off on delivery receipts without checking the boxes. I mentioned it once, casually, and he just shrugged. "It's all good, Helen. I trust our suppliers." I let it go. I was the volunteer coordinator. Inventory wasn't my department. Then came the morning that changed everything. It was a Thursday in late April. I had just poured our coffees and sat down across from James when I noticed he wasn't reading the newspaper. He was sitting very still, both hands flat on the table, staring at nothing. His jaw was tight. "James? Are you all right?" He didn't look at me right away. When he did, his eyes had a hardness I hadn't seen before. Not anger exactly, more like focus, the kind of focus I imagined a medic would have in a field hospital when the helicopters were incoming. "Helen, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen without interrupting." "Okay. Something is wrong with this place." I felt a small chill. "What do you mean?" "The food. Something is wrong with the food." I looked around the kitchen. Everything seemed normal. Volunteers serving, regulars eating, the usual clatter and conversation. "It looks fine to me." "It's not what it looks like. It's what it doesn't look like." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. 3 weeks ago, old Mr. Peterson stopped coming. You remember him? The man with the fishing hat who always sat by the window. I did remember. Earl Peterson. Sweet man, early 80s. He had come every day for months. I figured he moved or maybe went to stay with family. "He's in the hospital, Providence, Portland. Kidney failure." James paused. 2 weeks ago, Linda Fay stopped coming. Linda Fay. A tiny woman who always wore a flower in her hair. I noticed. I assumed she was sick. She is. She's in the hospital too. Gastrointestinal bleeding. James held my gaze. And last week, George Whitfield, the man with the wooden cane who always told jokes. My stomach tightened. George too? George too. Liver damage. James pulled a small spiral notebook from inside his jacket. I've been keeping track. In the last 2 months, 11 of our regulars have either been hospitalized or stopped coming because they got too sick to walk here. 11 people, Helen. All of them elderly. All of them eat here every day. That could be a coincidence. These are older people, James. They have health problems. I was a combat medic for 22 years. I know what coincidence looks like, and I know what a pattern looks like. This is a pattern. He opened the notebook. I could see dates, names, symptoms written in small, precise handwriting. Kidney failure, liver damage, stomach bleeding, chronic nausea. These are not random illnesses. These are consistent with one thing. What? Contamination. Either bacterial or chemical. Something in the food is making people sick, and it's hitting the most vulnerable the hardest. I stared at him. James, that's a serious accusation. This kitchen passes health inspections every quarter. I know it does. That's what worries me. He closed the notebook. Helen, I need you to do something for me, and I need you to be careful about it. What? Don't eat the food. The words sat between us like a stone dropped in water. What? Starting today, don't eat anything prepared in this kitchen. Bring your own lunch. Make an excuse. Say you're on a diet. Say your doctor told you to cut sodium. Whatever you want. But don't eat the food. James, you eat here every morning. I stopped eating here 10 days ago. I've been coming in, getting my tray, pushing the food around, and dumping it when no one's looking. He looked at me steadily. In 10 days, my stomach cramps have stopped. The headaches I was having are gone. The nausea I blamed on stress has disappeared. A cold feeling was spreading through my chest. You think someone is deliberately contaminating the food? I don't think anything yet. I'm gathering information. But I need more time, and I need you to be safe while I figure this out. He reached across the table and put his hand over mine. You've been kind to me, Helen. Kinder than anyone in a long time. I'm not going to let anything happen to you, but you have to trust me. I looked into his eyes and saw the same thing I had seen the first day I brought him coffee. A man who hadn't forgotten who he used to be. A man who still knew how to protect people. I trust you, I said. For the next 2 weeks, I brought my own lunch in a paper bag. I told everyone my doctor had put me on a special diet for my knees, anti-inflammatory, low sodium. Nobody questioned it. I did my job. Smiled at the volunteers, checked the schedules, answered the phone. But I watched. I watched everything. And once I started watching, I started seeing. Tyler's deliveries didn't always match the invoices. I caught a glimpse one morning when he left a clipboard on the front counter. The invoice said 40 pounds of ground beef from a licensed supplier. But I had seen the boxes he carried in, and the labels were from a company I didn't recognize. I wrote down the name, Pacific Provisions, LLC. I saw Dana Brennan come out of her office one afternoon with a stack of folders. She went to the paper shredder in the supply room and fed documents through it for 15 minutes. I had never seen her shred anything before. I noticed that Victor was spending more time on the phone behind closed doors. His big smile seemed tighter lately, his handshakes quicker. He had stopped doing his usual walkthroughs of the kitchen during meal service. I reported everything to James each morning over coffee. He listened, nodded, and wrote it all down in his notebook. Pacific Provisions, LLC, he repeated. I'll look into it. How? I asked. You don't have a computer. He gave me a faint smile. The public library is 2 blocks away, and I spent 22 years in the Army. I know how to do reconnaissance. 3 days later, James had answers. He met me before the kitchen opened, standing outside on the sidewalk with his notebook and a stack of printouts from the library's computer. Pacific Provisions LLC was registered 8 months ago. The registered agent is a woman named Dana Brennan. I felt like the ground shifted under my feet. It gets worse. The company has no physical address, no warehouse, no employees. It's a shell, a billing entity. Victor's nephew Tyler places orders with Pacific Provisions. The kitchen pays the invoices, and the money goes directly into an account controlled by Dana. They're billing the kitchen for food they're not actually buying. They're billing for premium food and delivering the cheapest product they can find. Expired surplus, rejected lots, items that failed safety inspections. They pocket the difference. Based on the invoices I could see at the library, they've run at least $300,000 through this scheme in 8 months. $300,000. I felt sick. and the food they're actually serving is making people ill. Elderly people with weakened immune systems eating contaminated, expired food 5 days a week. Some of them have no other source of nutrition, Helen. This kitchen is the only real meal they get. I thought of Earl Peterson in his fishing hat, Linda Fay with her flower, George and his jokes, all of them in the hospital, all of them trusting that the food they were being served was safe. "We have to go to the police," I said. "Not yet." James held up his hand. "I don't have enough hard evidence. I have observations, printouts, and a notebook. A good lawyer could dismiss all of it. I need something concrete. An actual sample of the food, tested by a lab, documentation from inside the office. Something that connects Victor directly to the shell company. How do we get that? You're in that building 5 days a week. I'm not asking you to steal anything. I'm asking you to keep your eyes open. If you see an opportunity to photograph a document, a delivery label, an invoice, take it. Use your phone. Be careful. And Helen," his voice dropped, "be very careful around Tyler. He's not just careless. I've been watching him." "He watches you." "Watches me?" "You mentioned the delivery discrepancy to him weeks ago. He hasn't forgotten. I've seen him look at you when you're not looking at him. It's not a friendly look." A shiver went through me despite the morning sun. "You think I'm in danger?" "I think you need to be aware. Don't stay late. Don't be alone in the building. And if anything feels wrong, anything at all, you leave. You call me at the library. The number is on this card." He handed me a small piece of paper with the library's reference desk number written on it. "Ask for James. They know me." The next week was the longest of my life. I went to work each morning with my phone in my pocket and my nerves on fire. I smiled. I coordinated volunteers. I answered phones. And I watched. On Monday, I photographed a delivery label when Tyler left a box unattended in the hallway. The label read Pacific Provisions LLC, but the original shipping sticker underneath, partially peeled off, showed the product had been rerouted from a recall lot. I could see the FDA recall number partially visible beneath Tyler's label. On Wednesday, I was walking past Dana's office when I heard her on the phone. The door was open a crack. I heard her say, "The inspection is in 3 weeks. We need to clean the records before then. Start with the Q1 invoices." I kept walking, my heart hammering. On Friday, something happened that nearly broke everything apart. I was in the supply closet getting napkins for the serving line when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned and Tyler was standing in the doorway, blocking the exit. He wasn't smiling. "Hey, Helen. You've been spending a lot of time wandering around lately." "I was getting napkins," I said, holding up the package. "Sure." He leaned against the door frame. "You know, my uncle's been real good to this place. Real good to you, too, giving you this gig when nobody else would hire a lady your age. It'd be a shame if someone started causing problems, asking questions, poking around where they shouldn't be." "I don't know what you're talking about, Tyler." He stared at me for a long moment. Then he smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Good. Keep it that way." He stepped aside and let me pass. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the napkins. I told James everything that afternoon. He listened with that medic's focus, his jaw tight, his pen moving across the notebook. "It's time," he said. "We have enough. But we're not going to the local police." "Why not?" "Because Victor Brennan donated $20,000 to the Police Benevolent Fund last year. It's on the kitchen's website, right there on the donor recognition page." "I don't know if that means anything, but I don't want to find out the hard way. We're going to the county health department, and we're going to a reporter." "A reporter?" "A reporter named Sarah Chen at the Oregonian. She's been covering nonprofit fraud for 2 years. I read everything she's written. She's thorough and she's honest." He paused. "And we're going to a food safety lab. I need you to bring me a sample." "A sample of what?" "Tomorrow's breakfast. Whatever they serve. Put some in a container and bring it to me after your shift. I'll get it to a lab that does independent testing. There's one on Hawthorne that works with attorneys." The next morning, I slipped a small, sealed container into my bag. When no one was looking, I scraped a portion of the scrambled eggs and a piece of the sausage into it. My hands were steady. I was past fear. I was angry now. Angry for Earl and Linda and George. Angry for every person who had walked through those doors trusting that someone was looking out for them. I gave the sample to James outside the library that afternoon. He tucked it into a small, insulated bag he had gotten from somewhere. "I'll have results in 4 days," he said. "The lab owes me a favor. I saved the owner's mother when she collapsed at a bus stop last year, CPR until the ambulance came." "Of course you did," I said. And despite everything, I almost smiled. 4 days later, James had the lab results. The eggs contained levels of coliform bacteria 3 times above the safe threshold. The sausage tested positive for sulfites at concentrations that indicated the meat had been chemically treated to mask spoilage. Both samples would have been flagged and destroyed in any legitimate food safety inspection. James had also been busy at the library. He had pulled public records on Pacific Provisions LLC, tracked its bank registration to a branch where Dana Brennan had personal accounts, and found that Victor Brennan had recently purchased a vacation property in Bend, Oregon, for $425,000, cash. "A man who runs a soup kitchen on a nonprofit salary just bought a $500,000 vacation house in cash," James said, laying the printouts on the library table between us. "That's not a coincidence. That's a confession." We went to the health department first, then to Sarah Chen at the Oregonian, then to the FBI field office in Portland because the kitchen received federal grant money, which made this a federal crime. The investigation moved fast after that. Health inspectors showed up at the kitchen unannounced on a Tuesday morning. I was there. I watched Victor's face when they walked in with their badges and their testing kits. The big smile disappeared. The polished shoes seemed to lose their shine. They shut the kitchen down that day. The inspectors found expired products in the freezer with altered date labels. They found invoices from Pacific Provisions that didn't match any legitimate supplier database. They found a second set of books on Dana's computer, the real books, showing exactly how much money had been diverted and where it had gone. Victor Brennan was arrested the following week. Dana Brennan was arrested the same day. Tyler was picked up at a gas station in Salem, trying to drive south with $15,000 in cash in a duffel bag in his back seat. The Oregonian ran Sarah Chen's story on the front page. Nonprofit kitchen director accused of poisoning the vulnerable to fund luxury lifestyle. The story went national. I read it on my phone sitting in my apartment above the dry cleaner, and I cried. Not from sadness, from relief, from rage that had finally found somewhere to go. James testified at the federal hearing. He wore a suit that the public defender's office helped him find at a donation center. It didn't fit perfectly, but he stood straight in it, shoulders back, chin up, the 82nd Airborne in every line of his body. He laid his notebook on the table and walked the prosecutors through every observation, every date, every conversation he had overheard. His voice was calm and precise, a medic giving a field report. Victor Brennan was convicted on 12 counts of fraud, embezzlement, and reckless endangerment. He got 18 years. Dana got 10. Tyler got 7. The total amount stolen was $487,000. 14 elderly people had been hospitalized with food-related illnesses during the 8 months of the scheme. One of them, George Whitfield, the man with the wooden cane and the jokes, never fully recovered. His liver damage was permanent. That's the part of the story that still keeps me up at night. Not the danger. Not Tyler blocking the doorway. Not the fear. It's George, sitting in a care facility now, too weak to walk to a kitchen that doesn't exist anymore because the people he trusted decided his life was worth less than a vacation house in Bend. After the trial, I went looking for James. He had stopped coming to the library. The staff at the reference desk hadn't seen him in days. I checked the shelters. I checked the parks. I walked every street in the neighborhood calling his name like a woman who had lost something she couldn't afford to lose. I found him on the 4th day. He was at Legacy Emmanuel Hospital. He had collapsed outside a convenience store. Dehydration, malnutrition, and his back had finally given out. 2 herniated discs pressing on his spinal cord. The doctors said he needed surgery. Without it, he would lose the ability to walk within a year. I sat in that hospital room holding his hand, and I made him a promise. The same way he had made me a promise when he told me not to eat the food. The same quiet, steady certainty. "I'm gonna fix this," I said. "You saved those people's lives, James. You saved mine. I'm not gonna let you lie here and fade away. Helen, you don't have to. Don't tell me what I have to do. I'm 63 years old and I just helped bring down a criminal operation. I think I can handle some paperwork." He almost laughed. It turned into a cough, but I saw the smile underneath. I spent the next 6 weeks fighting. I fought with the VA, which had denied his disability claim twice on technicalities. I got a veterans advocacy group involved, a woman named Patricia who had been fighting the VA for 20 years and who made bureaucrats nervous just by entering a room. Together, we got his claim reopened, reviewed, and approved. I contacted the attorney who had been convicted of running the Ponzi scheme that stole his pension. The case had been settled, but there was a restitution fund. James had never applied because he didn't know it existed. We filed the paperwork. 6 weeks later, he received a check for $34,000. It wasn't everything he had lost, not even close, but it was a start. Sarah Chen wrote a follow-up story about James, the homeless veteran who cracked a $500,000 fraud. People read it. People responded. A GoFundMe raised $78,000 in 2 weeks. A veterans housing nonprofit in Portland offered him an apartment, fully furnished, rent subsidized. The hospital agreed to perform his back surgery at a reduced rate, covered partly by the VA and partly by donations. I was there on the day James moved into his apartment. It was a 1-bedroom in a quiet building near the waterfront. Clean, warm, with big windows that let in the afternoon light. He stood in the middle of the living room, leaning on a cane because his back hadn't fully healed yet, and he looked around at the furniture, the bookshelf we had filled together, the framed photo of his late wife that I had helped him hang above the desk. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then he turned to me, and there were tears on his face. In all the months I had known him, through everything that had happened, I had never seen James Okafor cry. "I was a medic," he said, his voice rough. "For 22 years, my job was to keep people alive, to stop the bleeding, to hold things together until help arrived. When I lost everything, when I ended up on the street, I thought that part of me was gone. I thought the man who could help people had died somewhere along the way." "He didn't die," I said. "He was just waiting. You woke him up." He put his hand on my shoulder. "A cup of coffee, Helen. That's how it started. You brought me a cup of coffee and sat down like I was a person worth sitting with. Do you know what that did? I think I'm starting to understand. I tell you what it did. It reminded me that I still knew how to pay attention, that I still knew how to read a situation, gather information, protect someone who needed protecting. You didn't just give me coffee, Helen. You gave me back my purpose." I couldn't speak. I just hugged him, this tall, dignified man with his army jacket and his medic's eyes and his notebook full of evidence that had saved 14 lives and sent 3 criminals to prison. That was 8 months ago. I'm 63 now. Christine flew out from Boston for Thanksgiving, and she cried when I told her the whole story. Kevin called from Germany and stayed on the phone for 2 hours, the longest we had talked in years. "I'm proud of you, Mom," he said. I don't think he had ever said that to me before. I still work at a community kitchen. A new one, run by good people who do things the right way. I check the invoices myself now. I check the delivery labels. I check the food. Nobody minds. They understand why. And every Saturday morning, I walk to James's apartment and we have coffee together. Real coffee, from a real kitchen, in real mugs that belong to him. He's doing better. His back surgery was a success. He walks without the cane most days. He volunteers at the VA hospital, visiting veterans who are going through what he went through. He helps them with their paperwork, their claims, their appeals. He sits with them the way I sat with him, like they are people worth sitting with. Last Saturday, I asked him a question. "James, what would you tell people? If you could say one thing about everything that happened, what would it be?" He thought about it. He sipped his coffee. Then he said, "In the Army, we had a saying, no one gets left behind. But out here, in the real world, people get left behind every day. They get left behind on park benches and in shelters and in hospital waiting rooms. They get left behind by systems that are supposed to protect them and by people who are supposed to care." He set down his mug and looked at me. "But sometimes, one person decides not to walk past. One person decides to stop, to see, to care. And that changes everything. Not because one person can fix the whole world, but because kindness is contagious. It wakes something up in people. It woke something up in me. That cup of coffee you brought me didn't just save my morning, Helen. It started a chain of events that saved 14 lives and put criminals behind bars, all because you chose to see me when everyone else chose not to. I think about that a lot. I think about the morning I poured that extra cup of coffee and carried it to the corner table. I think about how close I came to not doing it. How easy it would have been to stay behind the counter, to mind my own business, to walk past another invisible person in a world full of invisible people. I think about Earl Peterson, who is back in his fishing hat, eating meals at the new kitchen. I think about Linda Fay, who recovered fully and still wears a flower in her hair every single day. I think about George Whitfield, whose liver will never be the same, but who still tells jokes from his wheelchair, because that's who George is. And I think about James, a combat medic who lost everything and still found a way to save people. A man who sat on the outside of the world, watching and listening, waiting for someone to remind him that he still mattered. I was that someone. Not because I'm special, not because I'm brave, but because I stopped. That's all. I stopped. And I poured a cup of coffee. And I sat down. If there's a lesson in all of this, it's simple. Don't walk past. Don't assume someone else will stop. Don't tell yourself it's not your business or not your problem. The person you walk past today might be the person who saves your life tomorrow, or the person whose life you save just by seeing them. Kindness isn't grand, it isn't expensive, it isn't complicated. It's a cup of coffee carried to a corner table. It's a moment of eye contact that says, I see you, you matter, you are not invisible. That's what I learned, that's what James taught me, and that's what I carry with me every single day. Welcome to Twisted RKT Stories. I share new life stories here every day, and I would really appreciate it if you hit subscribe and liked this video. Write in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is. I'm so curious to know where all you wonderful people are tuning in from. And now, 2 of my most popular stories will pop up on the screen, so you can choose what to watch next.